Hello, guys. Good morning. Welcome to the technical router. In the yesterday's, I have started with an interview concept that is and differences between C++ and Java, and I also explained about the main method and also the print statement also. Today, let us see the three-layered architecture from the Spring Boot. This three-layer architecture contains an three layer that is an repository layer, service layer, and controller layer. It contains three layers: control layer, service layer, repository layer. These are the three layers in the three-layer architecture. Here is an Postman client. Postman client. This is a database. This Postman client, it will check the client input. Whenever the client is going to give the input, this Postman client will check the input. It will check the client input and it will use it for a testing of the application. It is used for testing our application. This Postman client will check the client input and it is used for testing of our application. Whenever the client receives the input from, whenever he receives the client from the user, this client is going to request to the controller layer. It requests to the controller layer. This controller layer, it will process the request. Whatever the client has sent the request, this controller layer receives that request and process that request. Something, what are the errors or there's something, it will check it and it will send it to the service layer. This controller layer, it will process and send it. It will process the request or about to process the data and send it to the service layer. This service layer contain and business logic of our application. It contain the business logic. It contain the business logic of our application and it send it to the repository layer. This repository layer is also called as a DAO layer. DAO layer, that is a data access object. This DAO layer is also called as a data access object, and this layer is responsible for communicating with the database. Whatever the data is and whatever the data is there, it will communicate with the database and will take the data and that database will send a responses to this repository layer and it will send it to the service layer and again it send the response to the controller layer and this controller layer that will process the request, that is and whatever the response is got from the request is got from the database and it will process it that input request and it send it to the Postman client. This three layer architecture is a two-way process of communication. That Postman will kind send the request from the control layer to service layer to repository layer, that to database. It will this repository layer is responsible for communicate with the database. It will communicate with that database and that it will send a response to the repository layer, service layer, control again to the client. This client will give that whatever the data is done with it and it will give to the user. This is about the three-layered architecture. That means, and this client will take an input from the user. It will check that input, and it will send a request to the controller layer. That controller process and send it to the service layer. Yeah, there when our application business logic will be going off our application, whatever the data we have sent, and that will send it to the repository layer, and this repository layer will communicate with the database, and it will ask for the data, and it send it again to the repository layer, and then it back to service layer, and it back to the controller layer. This controller process that the request, and it send it to the client. That is about the three layer architecture, guys. Thank you.